Hi there, this is Curtis Dieter. Like all of you, I am many things. A husband, a father, and a son. I'm a hard worker and a dreamer, a writer and a publisher, but underneath everything, I am made of rust and glass. You are listening to Proud to Be of Rust and Glass, a podcast series of conversations surrounding the creative journey and all the good and ill associated with making great art in the Midwest. It is the human side of colors brushed onto canvas, of words scribbled between covers, of sweat and grit bled into telling our stories. Real stories about real people doing what we love best, making great art. Welcome to today's episode of Proud to Be of Rust and Glass. Today's guest is Shannon Eis, a mixed media artist who specializes in found object sculptures, who she calls JUNKEEZ. She has a studio, Wonderland Studio, right here in downtown Toledo with fellow artist Rose Leatherby. It is one of those rare spaces in the world where the second you walk in, you can feel the presence of seasoned artists at work. Here is her story, where we reveal the human behind the art. Great to have you today, Shannon. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So we'll jump right in. I'm just going to ask you some questions to sort of reveal the artist within, so to speak. Let's start with your origin story. Where did you first realize you were an artist?
It took me a long time to actually call myself an artist, but my grandmother was super creative. She was always cutting old clothes up and socks up and sewing them together and making dolls. And there was a Blade article that I'm actually going to the library today to try to find, where she embroidered the Lord's Supper onto a ginormous piece of velvet.
Oh, that's fantastic.
She actually made two. One was on red and one was on black, and it was in the Blade and everything else, but I got to find it because I didn't know about it until not too long ago. And I got to go out and find these tapestries because one was donated to a church, and I just don't know what church it is.
I can't imagine the amount of work that went into something like that.
I know, they were ginormous too.
So you sort of learned how to be an artist and learned that you were an artist through a lot of the stuff you did with your grandmother. Can you give us some examples of that or some of the things that you saw in her?
Mostly, mostly it was my mom. Okay, so my grandma was super creative. She made all kinds of stuff, and therefore, all her kids pretty much were mostly all creative. My mom builds decks, she paints things, she builds things, she whatever. When I was a kid, we didn't have much money, and we moved around a lot. I've lived in New Mexico, Arizona, military.
Okay.
So I've been all over, seen all kinds of things, and I think because we didn't have much money either, I was cutting up my clothes and sewing them back together with other arms and things like that to be creative, I guess, but also because we didn't have any money, so you got to do what you got to do, right? And my JUNKEEZ actually started because I was at Jeep and I was watching, because I used to work at Jeep, and I was watching these parts go by on the skillets. The skillets are the floor that moves, that holds the carriers with the Jeep bodies on them. Mm-hmm. I was watching all these little parts go by, and I'm thinking they're going to get swept off and they're going to get thrown in the trash. What a shame. I was I wonder what I can do with those. And that's where JUNKEEZ came from. I just went home and I took a handful of crap from the floor from work home, then I had some other stuff and put together my first JUNKEE.
Awesome. So traveling around, you kind of learned to take little pieces of anything that you could find.
And I saw I had inspiration everywhere, but I didn't know when I was a kid that it was inspiration. Right. And now I'll think back on things oh my God, I completely remember that from kindergarten, or that idea or whatever.
That's awesome. Do you have one moment that sticks out in your mind that you realized hey, maybe I am an artist?
Artomatic 419, actually, 2015, I want to say. First time I ever showed my art to anybody, besides friends and family that knew things that I could do. I set up, and I was so scared to see people walking by my art pieces, and I didn't know what they were going to say or what they were going to think or how I was going to feel about what they said or what they thought. I don't know. I got to know so many people there, and that was it. It was it from there.
That's awesome. That's
so 2015 is right to 2017, probably somewhere in there is where I decided to actually call myself an artist. Yeah.
It's really hard to put yourself out there. I mean, you're exposing a part of you that, you've only been with for so long.
Right.
That nobody else has seen, that is so, integral to who you are. So throughout that sort of process from doing all the things to realizing you're an artist, what's the biggest struggle you've had with creating specifically here in the Midwest?
I honestly don't have a struggle creating. I'm so my mind is creatively overactive ADD. I can't not create. Like, I'm just constantly always making something. At home, I'm baking. At the studio, I'm making art. If I'm at a restaurant, I'm making something out of the straw paper. I can't not create things.
Is there any struggles with being, the other side of being an artist in the Midwest, not just the creating side of it, but obviously nowadays in today's art culture, there's more than just making your art. You also have to get your art out there.
Right.
How has that been for you, that side of it?
So I feel like social media has a huge impact on my work getting out there and people seeing my work, but also by showing your work in different shows and in different venues. I used to show my work at Angelwood Gallery in Grand Rapids, Ohio.
Awesome.
I show at Copper Moon on Airport Highway. And if you've never been there before, they do fused glass, and you can literally walk in whenever you want and make whatever you want. And they have somebody there that'll help you. They have tables set up. You can take your kids in there and make something whenever you want to.
That's really cool.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know
That's
that.
really, really cool.
But they also host a lot of local art teachers, and they do a lot of different classes there.
Okay.
So, yeah, That's a good place to go.
Awesome.
But Art on Market shops downtown in the Libby Glass building. There's so many local artists' art in that place. If you've never been there, you got to go check it out. They're constantly getting new artists and stuff, but I always have work in there too.
Awesome.
And I've taught a class there too, so there will be more of those in the future there.
Yeah, what kind of classes have you taught over the years?
While I make my junkies, my characters that are out of like wood and metal antiques, I also do a lot of work with resin, epoxy resin, and I teach resin class. That's like I'm the only teacher that I know of in Northwest Ohio up to like Ann Arbor that actually teaches epoxy resin because it's such an expensive medium. So that's like my main class, resin geodes, resin beach scenes.
Awesome.
You can encase anything in resin. But I also work with alcohol inks and acrylic painting, and I'm learning to use oil paint right now too. So
very cool. So we've mentioned JUNKEEZ a few times. Can you tell us a bit more about your process with that?
Sure. I love going to the antique mall and thrifting and things like that, yard sales, whatever, and finding just like unique pieces of whatever. I love antiques and vintage things, and I tend to focus more on like wooden vases or wooden balls, like any kind of wooden chunks that somebody at some point in time had carved a face into or something like that. But then I also like brass lamps, brass and all metal chandeliers, and I'll take them apart and I'll use like the little spider arms, for JUNKEEZ arms, and I'll use bobbins for legs. But when I'm looking for stuff, on occasion I'll have like a custom piece that I'm making for somebody, and I want something specific or a specific shape or whatever. Generally, when I just go to the antique mall just for whatever, I'm looking for just whatever catches my eye, and I tend to gear more towards like decorative things, like antique. You know how like the old chandelier arms are all
very ornate and twisting.
Yes, ornate. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, I like fancy looking stuff.
Very cool.
And I like faces, so all my JUNKEEZ are gonna have a face, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of social media earlier, I think one of the first times I was exposed to your art was on social media, and I don't remember the order, but I remember you had made a Darth Vader JUNKEEZ that I just like fell in love with. He was cute. He looked like a very ornate English gentleman, Darth Vader, with very different parts. It was Darth Vader, but your style of Darth Vader.
Well, and I did Mandalorian too. At the
and then
same
you followed
time.
up with that, and that was so cool to me. I loved that so much.
I
was a huge
surprised
Star Wars
myself
fan.
with that one. I was like, how did I do that?
They were very cool. I showed my wife, and she was like, "No, we can't spend any more money on art right now." But I was like, I kind of want Shannon to make me one of those.
I'm going to owe you a Yoda. Don't worry.
Yes. So you've mentioned a little bit about some of the other artistic forms you've been working on besides the JUNKEEZ. Which one has been your favorite to sort of dabble in?
I love resin. I love epoxy resin. I love making my JUNKEEZ, but I love working with epoxy resin. There's just so many things you can do with it, and I'm constantly learning. Like the further I go, the more things I make, the more I learn. And I've been doing it for about 10 years now, playing with resin, so...
Always sort of growing yourself as an artist and testing yourself and testing what your limits are and all that sort of thing.
But what's beneficial for others is that I've been through all the trials and tribulations and screwing stuff up and all that. That's why people are like, oh my God, Shannon, help me. People will call me all the time. Can you encase my wedding flowers? Can you, I can do pretty much anything that you think you can do with resin and then some.
Very cool. I love it. So The important question here is what makes you proud to be of Rust and Glass?
So the pool of talent that is in the area or in the Rust Belt itself, even, I'm proud to be a part of that creative pool that we have out here. Like, I know that we knew Toledo was a creative city and we had a lot of artists and writers and dancers and, everything. But I don't think we really knew how creative Toledo was until COVID hit. And then everybody started posting the things that they were making. And now it's just like, it's blown up. It's crazy. I'm so proud to be a part of Rust and Glass and the Rust Belt and Toledo, alone because of this amazing pool of creatives. And I just love Toledo as a city anyway. Oh, yeah. I was born here. I've been around, but I was born here. And so I'm back and I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, Toledo's art scene is as you meet one person and they introduce you to 3,
yeah,
and they introduce you to 9, and all of a sudden you realize there's so many artists doing so many different things, and very passionate people, very dedicated people,
yes,
who are just phenomenal talents. And you find one, you just uncover more, and it's never ending. I think I've worked with almost 250 at this point, and I just feel like I'm barely scratching the surface on how incredible the Midwest art scene is.
It is crazy. And what's great about it too is I feel like in some cities, like writers seclude themselves, poets seclude themselves, artists seclude themselves. They don't do much all together. But here, like, it's constantly, all the big things and it's artists, writers, poetry, like all in one jumble. I feel like most of the different functions that we have.
Oh, yeah, and it's never more than like a 5 or 10 minute drive to find a studio or to find an art festival or, find a local bookstore that does cool events
and
for
has
writers.
Local writers' books. Yep.
I love it. You can't get any better than that.
That's the truth.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners about yourself or about your artistic journey that we might not have touched on?
Another thing that made me so creative is that I kind of had a rough childhood. We moved around a lot. There was abuse. I have PTSD, anxiety, things like that. And I try to stay out of my own head by creating. Right. And that was my coping mechanism growing up, I feel like. And it's just what kind of led me into how I'm doing now. But I will say that I did win my first art contest when I was in the 5th grade.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I made
that's a hot start.
I know, right? And I had no idea back then, but I made a bumper sticker. It was a bumper sticker contest at school.
Okay.
I lived in White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. I made one that had like kids on the playground, like there was like 2 kids on a slide. One was black, one was Asian. There was a little white girl on a swing set, and then I put "Believe in Children" on it. And I was in the newspaper. My mom's got the thing still, and it's just crazy to even see it. Like, a little 5th grader won a freaking art contest.
That's so awesome. You were walking around with your head held high for a while after that, weren't you?
Probably, I won something.
Looking around the corner for fans.
All done with crayons, probably, too. I don't even remember.
So you mentioned some of the studios that you're in, but where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or check out your art?
So they can definitely go to Shannon Eis Art on Facebook and Instagram. My name is spelled Shannon and then EIS and art, A-R-T. So Shannon Eis Art on Facebook and Instagram. And then also you can go to the Wonderland Studio Toledo Facebook page. We try to keep it updated and post new work from the studio on both of those. And then you can come down to the Davis Building and visit whenever you want to. The address is 151 North Michigan, and it's the Davis Building. I'm on the 2nd floor, Suite 210. It is a secured building, so just let me know that you're coming or when you get there so I can come down and unlock the door for you.
Awesome. And are you there pretty much all day during the week? Or?
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday from noon to 6, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. But those are my general hours. But if anybody ever wants to stop in on a weekend or whenever, just get a hold of me and I'll be there for you.
Awesome. And I will say I've been to the studio a few times. We worked on a project together recently, and it's an awesome place to visit. It's good conversation. You see sort of pieces of that process that you do with your art, and you see the completed artwork on the wall. Obviously Rose's stuff is there too, and Rose is another phenomenal artist, and it's a very cool place to check out. So
it's definitely whimsy, and you can see that there are mad artists at work in there, like you said earlier, for sure, because there's like half done art, half done sculptures, half done all kinds of frames everywhere, like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
The coolest part though is that our floor is black and sparkly.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It is. It's a little distracting, but it's very cool. Well, Shannon, thank you again for being here on the show with us today. It's been great getting to know you and your art. We really loved having this conversation with you.
I loved having it too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so much fun talking with Shannon Eis today. I hope you get a chance to visit her studio or check out her art on social media. Her art is unique, to say the least, an experience you'll never forget. This has been today's episode of Proud to Be of Rust and Glass. I'm your host and producer, Curtis Dieter. The executive producer is Chris Pfeiffer. If you'd like to join the conversation, visit wgte.org/rustandglass. Thanks for listening.
WGTE. Voices around us.
WGTE is supported in part by American Rescue Plan Act funds allocated by the City of Toledo and the Lucas County Commissioners and administered by the Arts Commission.